write about messy people who have messy, complicated things that are hard to explain, and maybe that means that the books feel a little messy sometimes.
I'm Nathan Maharaj, and this is Kobo in Conversation. My guest is the novelist Rainbow Rowell, author of the novels Eleanor and Park and Fangirl, as well as the 2017 revival of Marvel's Runaways comic book series, the current run of Marvel's She-Hulk comics, and many, many other books and stories. Her new book, Slow Dance, is about a couple of grown-ups who've been friends since they were kids, but didn't manage to stay friends through early adulthood. It's 14 years after they last spoke to one another, and they're trying to figure out what kind of relationship they have now and whether they might not have been exactly right about what kind of relationship they had back then. Rainbow Rowell, welcome to Kobo.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I'm so happy this book exists. I'm so happy I got to read this book.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you, though, to start by setting up this story of our characters, Shiloh and Carrie.
Okay, yeah. Well, I did. I thought you did a pretty good job, actually. So Shiloh and Carrie are two poor kids from a rough neighborhood in Omaha with pretty challenging family situations. And they are part of a three-person friendship pretty much from middle school on. So they have like a third musketeer, Mikey, an artsy kid. And the three of them just really get each other through middle school and high school. And everybody around them thinks that Shiloh and Carrie are probably dating. But Shiloh and Carrie, it does not really occur to them that they should be dating. And Shiloh especially is convinced that their relationship should never change. She's very afraid because they're about to graduate, and Carrie's going off to join the Navy, and she's going to college to study theater. And she's everybody's saying, right, like at the end of high school, that everything's about to change. You're gonna have this whole new life. And I remember in high school, a teacher even telling us, "Oh, your high school friends are not the friends who these people will not be your friends in a couple of years," which was such a devastating thing to hear in high school. So she's convinced that their relationship shouldn't change. So she basically makes Carrie promise that their relationship will never change. And that's the death knell of any relationship. As soon as you say, "No, it's never going to change," well, then you actually can't grow and be together.
Mm-hmm.
So their friendship indeed falls apart after high school. And so every time I set up the book, I talk a lot about high school, but the book really is set in their 30s. So as the book begins, we are with Shiloh. She hasn't talked to Carrie for 14 or 15 years. Mikey, their friend, is getting married for a second time, and Shiloh and Carrie, well, Shiloh expects that Carrie might be at this wedding, and she is both hoping he will be there and fearing that he will be there. They did not part on good terms, necessarily. And so she has all of this anxiety about seeing him again. And she's been through a lot. She's also been married and divorced, and she has two kids. So she's coming to him at a point in her life where she doesn't feel like she's anything she was supposed to be in high school. You know, in high school, people still ask you what you want to be. They kind of stop the minute you graduate.
Yeah.
And she was going to be an actress, and she's not an actress. And she's a single mom. She's living back in the old neighborhood with her own mother. So she really feels like she's nothing that he would expect her to be. Does that stand up? Does that seem right?
That's perfect. I was tempted to, while you were doing that, to just like hit the mute button and just kind of sigh off mic because I finished reading it last night. I'm in that state right now.
Okay.
The tension at the start of it isn't about whether Shiloh and Carrie are going to end up together. In that opening scene, the tension seems to be fueled by what was it that pushed them apart? Why are these apparent best friends so tentative about approaching one another? It is not a rom-com approved like meet cute.
No.
It's cautious. I don't want to spoil anything, and we're not.
Let's not spoil it, but I think I can allude to it a little bit.
Well,
go ahead.
Maybe this keeps us really clear of spoilers. Can you speak about dropping the reader into this moment to meet these characters at Mikey's wedding, after they haven't seen each other for so long?
I've had some practice now. I think the last time we spoke, maybe my most recent book was Eleanor and Park, which was also dual POV. And
it was Fangirl.
Okay.
It was Fangirl. Yeah.
I feel like I have become a little bit more conscious of where I am with the reader and like the more dramatic place to put the reader, and when to give the reader the information that like to tell them the story in the way so that when you're giving them the information, they're like at their peak interest for that information. Um, and so it felt like that would be the moment because oh, you know what? Now that we're talking about it, I first started this book in high school and I was going to write it chronological. So I first started it a year later and I started it in high school, with the two of them at a Dungeons and Dragons game. Um, and it didn't take off. It just didn't take off. And one of the reasons it didn't take off is because the meaning of Dungeons and Dragons is totally different in 2024 than it would be in 1989 or whenever they were playing. Like it was the thing for desperate nerds at that time.
It was also like attached to a moral panic.
Right. Oh, exactly. It was like underground. It was something weird people did. Now it's like something cool people do, and everybody knows what it is. So I realized that I had someone read the book, and they were like, "I don't get it at all." And I thought, "Oh, right, I'm throwing that away." But I also ended up just setting the whole book aside and thinking about it for a year because I couldn't crack where to start the story. So now I'm contradicting that I said I've gotten more experienced. Maybe I've just gotten more experience at doing it wrong. So when I came back to it, I felt like I need to move all of the action up, that it's actually more interesting to see them in the future and wonder how they got there than to tell you in order how they got there. Rather than watching it fall apart, to wonder how it fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so initially it was just going to be this like, I started writing it, I don't remember the year. It was coming right out of the pandemic.
Mm.
And I couldn't, I made no progress. I had like 15, 20,000 words. I abandoned it for a really long time and I worked on Scattered Showers, my collection of short stories. So, and then in that version, it was like started in high school and was told completely chronologically through their 30s.
I was going to ask about these before times because the book does this. It drops us into these chapters that are before,
Right,
and we're getting to know these characters as we're as real time as the present of the novel, which is 2006. Um,
right.
as that spools out, we're dipping back into their teenage past and getting these glimpses. Um, about the relationship to each other. We're starting to intuit ourselves as readers that this triangle, it doesn't look quite equilateral. It's
Right.
there's an off balance to it. There's something special between Carrie and Shiloh.
Yep.
Um, I was going to ask you about whether there was like a larger body of these before scenes that you drew from, and it sounds like there was. So I guess the question I really want to ask now is there relationship with Dungeons and Dragons, is that canon now? Can we intuit that that's off
Yeah.
stage?
Yes, you can intuit that they did play Dungeons and Dragons together and that Shiloh was a pain in the ass and that she kind of bullied Carrie the whole time.
I assume she was Dungeon Master.
No, she was a tag along. She's too cool to play.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
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 that's the other power move.
yeah. Yeah, you're right. That's the other way to be controlling. Yeah. Yeah, and it's actually a very sweet scene between them, and I had a hard time giving it up. And I actually think that scene is what was holding me back because I liked it so much that every time I'd come back to the book, I wouldn't cut the scene. It was too long. It didn't move anything forward. And it wasn't until I cut the scene that the day that I cut that scene is the day that I finally moved forward on the books. So,
So speaking of dropping things, um,
yeah.
there's a part where again early on, like actually at that moment of their reunion, Shiloh wonders whether to even bother catching up with Carrie. And it's
Yeah.
because the way she puts it is she feels like she's bad at holding on to people.
Yeah.
And she sees it as something like Mikey's really good at. Maybe he's really exceptionally good at it, and that's like kind of what makes it hard is being around someone who's so skilled at holding on to these connections. He's an awful yardstick, maybe, for like how to measure, the state of good repair of one's relationships. I found that I found that so moving. I found it relatable, painfully so. I wonder, is it something is it something you feel as well? Or maybe it was like one of those pandemic feelings that I think we all had about our relationships.
I think when I'm writing these characters, I'm always like splintering off little pieces of myself and then elaborating on them. I think I want to hold on to every relationship and I will hold on to relationships when I shouldn't. But I also think that when life gets to be a lot, and Shiloh's life has gotten to be a lot, you start to, especially when you have young children, you just start editing people from your life, sometimes consciously, sometimes
Mhm.
unconsciously. Um, so I think, yes, I have felt that at stages in my life. I think there've been times when I felt like I'm letting people go, and then there are times when I feel like I'm holding on too tight. And I think for her, her life has really been shrinking around her problems,
Mhm.
around her husband, who was a lot, and around now she has these two kids. She's a single mom. So I think you're right that Mikey is extraordinarily good at it. But the real thing between Shiloh and Carrie is, she can see that Carrie was the some people you're supposed to hold on to. You're supposed to work a little harder, and that she failed him in that way.
Mm. When you describe the appearance of these characters as we talk about meeting them,
So yeah.
it it comes fairly late. We don't get a strong like sense of for a love story,
Yeah.
which this really is. We don't really get to linger on their faces much
Hmm.
until fairly late in the book, and and when it happens, we get a sense they seem like normal people, nice looking people, but normal people, but who are profoundly beautiful to one another.
Hmm.
Can you tell me about imagining these characters?
Um, well, first of all, I find description in books, when a book tells me right away what someone looks like,
Hmm.
it kind of jolts me out of the reality of the book, because I think if you, the narrator, already know what someone looks like, you're not going to observe what they look like unless you're observing something specific. So I find that I'm almost never, I'm just like, and she had dark hair and she was tall and she's this, and people thought she was cute. Like, I always want it to be that it's revealed to you when the character thinks about it. So there are often scenes at the beginning of a book when someone is getting ready or they're looking in a mirror. And so they have a
Hmm.
moment to self-reflect and give you like, okay, this is kind of what I look like. Um, yeah, I think I only write about normal looking people. And because I don't find people objectively attractive very much. Like,
Hmm.
I find people more specifically and subjectively attractive, and I think that's a much more interesting attraction in a love story. What not that the person is objectively beautiful, but like the thing about a person that you kind of can't stop focusing on, that you kind of can't let go on, or that the longer you know someone, like that one feature becomes just so, not even just like when you're in love with them, but like even a friend, you love them and they become very dear to you. So so yeah, I thought about what they would look like, especially as teens. I don't, I don't. Do you have teenagers?
I do now. Yeah, my eldest is 14.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I have, in the situation of writing YA books and then also having teenagers and going to like teen events, you see what teenagers actually look like. So definitely in writing them as teens, they are not, um, finished.
Yeah.
They're also kids who have no money.
Mm.
Carrie especially doesn't even have the basic things in his life he needs. So to write him as, I know, super hot Disney teen star would ring really false to me. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but I just kind of start thinking about what they might look like, and then more importantly, what they might like about each other. And also I thought in this book a lot about how the people that when you go to your reunion, I don't know, do they do high school reunions in Canada? I assume they do.
After the thaw, when it's when it's safe to
Oh,
cross
after
to cross the
right,
barren wastes. Yeah.
exactly. Well, the people who seem attractive to you, who everybody's like, wow, look at that person at the reunion, are not the people who everyone liked in high school. So
Mm.
I wanted to kind of look at that too, that they had become probably a little bit more not just attractive, but like settled in themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, attractive in like in more of a holistic sense of like
yeah, yeah.
that like there's a magnetism.
Right. When Carrie shows up at the wedding, all the girls they went to high school with are like, wow, was he always hot? Is it just that he doesn't have kids and he's never been married?
Yeah. It's just he looks like he's still under warranty. Wow.
Exactly. Exactly.
I guess that speaks to what you said earlier, which is being mindful of what the information, the experiences you're giving to the reader at what time and at what point and what they're ready for. And by the time we get to see through the description these characters, Like there's nothing you could have said about Shiloh that wouldn't have made me think, oh, she is like the cutest. Like,
Good. There's a moment pretty deep where a character off screen says she looks like a young Cher. And then someone else says, like, that's a very generous approximation. And I thought that's exactly kind of where I want her to land, like where she
mm,
could be, yeah, in some ways she's kind of hot, but then like, oh, that's kind of generous, like
yeah, yeah. I understand that you are not only an avowed fan of Stephanie Meyer, the author of the Twilight books, but specifically what I've heard you admire is that she writes about teenage love in a way that feels real.
yeah,
The way it takes characters over. We have no moderation, no attenuation for it when we're that age. In Slow Dance, we've got characters though who are processing some of those teenage feelings in adulthood. I wonder if that was something that was like apparent to you that you were like, whoa, these are spicy and these characters are a different place. And that's like an interesting problem to solve as an author. Or, I mean, was it a more intuitive thing as you approached it?
do you mean like the fact that their teen feelings and their adult feelings are all kind of glommed up?
Yeah, exactly. That it's kind of they lock them away and then open them up and they're like, oh my God, I've got all these feelings and I've got my name on them, but I'm a grown person and these were put there by a teenager.
Right. Well, that's what real people do to you, I think. Like
Yeah.
you encounter someone from your past and you have to deal with the person you were when you last saw them. Like as much as you have to deal with the person they were, you have to deal with the person you were. And like if there was a mess left, you're probably the one who left it. And coming back to that, I think, is always a reckoning. Yeah, I think Carrie and Shiloh, when they were falling in love, which we see happen, they're too young to know what it is, and they're too
Mm,
young to recognize it, to name it. And I think your ideas about what love are as a teen are all over the place, and you're guessing most of the time. Um, and yet, when they come back as adults, they have to reopen who they were. I just think that's what we're doing all the time. But
mm,
that might, I'm married to someone who I've known since I was in middle school, so I think I have I have a regular experience of like having to reckon with myself at every point on the timeline. Like that there's kind of like not an adult version of myself that, and vice versa, that my husband hasn't encountered.
yeah. Oh yeah, I have the same. I've known my wife since we were in the 10th grade.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so it's very much the same thing. And sometimes
Sometimes you
it's
have
like,
that picture of someone that's like 30 years out of date.
yeah, yeah, there's that moment where I'm like, wow, I still think she looks like 15, but not.
Mhm.
That's weird.
I have the same feeling. I often look at him and think, like, I have these moments of like remembering exactly what he looked like in high school. And having kids has made it a little worse because our kids kind of look like my husband. And so I'll have these moments of like, oh, right. Yeah.
Um, in this business of books
Yes.
that we find ourselves in, books about young adults with young adult problems are supposed to be sold to young adults. And then the books about adults and adult problems, those are supposed to get sold to adults, generally
Right.
speaking. You became an accidental YA author through Eleanor and Park, which is
Yes.
funny to me because I'm not like a big YA reader, but that's the book that I read, the first one of yours that I read, and I fell hard for
Yeah.
it. Slow Dance is about characters though, who's like I say, as their young adult and real adult problems are in the middle of it. As you were writing it, did it ever cross your mind that you were like, well, I've made quite a riddle for the marketing department here?
Uh, yeah. I mean, yeah, in an unpleasant way, because Eleanor Park did not go to the same publisher as Attachments, my first book, an adult
Yeah,
book.
that's right.
It was not what they were expecting, I think. And I thought I had written an adult book.
Yeah,
And yeah, I thought I'd written an adult book. And it was published
yeah,
for adults in the UK first. And I thought I was writing about, I just remember thinking, I want to write about
yeah,
that feeling of falling in love for the first time. But it is very, very rooted in the main characters in the teen year, through their teen years, they're 16. And there was even talk of like maybe I should write bookends
mm,
from the adult standpoint to make this more of an adult book. But like, hi, I'm 50 and I'm
yeah.
reflecting back.
Oh, the one that got away, or
Exactly. But then that would tell you what happens, right? Like you would know
right.
it would be more like slow dance, actually, come to think of it. You would know that they were together or they weren't together. Um, So there is a little intro to Eleanor and Park that I wrote after the fact to and it's like Park reflecting.
Mm,
We don't know at what age he's reflecting. But anyway, so no, I mean it was like a bad riddle. It was like a problem right away because Eleanor and Park was a difficult sell.
mhm,
And my publisher initially was pitching it to adult authors or to editors. And then it was an editor who did handle both adult and young adult, Sarah Goodman, at St. Martin's Press, who said, could we publish this as YA? I think The Fault in Our Stars had just come out or was about to come out. So it was
yeah.
it felt like a moment, I think. I think she saw an opportunity. Um, and I was just happy to have it published at that point. Um, but I mean, okay, so here it's been 10 years since I've had a contemporary book. I've been writing fantasy
Mhm.
since I've had an adult book. My last one was Landline in 2014. So I do think about the fact that I'm not necessarily making things easy for myself because I walk into a bookstore and my books are all not like they're in different sections.
Yeah, that's generally not advised,
No.
but
An editor said first after attachments, okay, your next book should have a cover that matches attachments. So this is the attachments cover. So as you're writing your next book, think about how the covers could match. And it just broke my brain. I couldn't do
oh,
it. I was like, I don't work like that.
no, well, also, not only do you not work like that, but we've seen like it happens all the time where an author will be 3 books into their career, and maybe the third book has a particularly striking cover, and the first two get repackaged
Yeah,
to fall into line.
true.
Certainly, nobody's asking Samantha Irby. Okay, it's gonna be we're gonna put a badger on the cover of this one. So give me badger essays.
They might be saying that to her. I
They
don't know.
might be. They might, but they know. But in that case, that person knows what they're doing. That's fine.
It's working. Yeah, it's working for Sam.
Um.
I don't want to like totally name drop, but I do have a funny anecdote and I am friends with Sam. And so I have been part of conversations where she's trying to come up with the next cute, grumpy animal for her book covers. Like, there's like not an infinite supply of animals that are both cute and like the right kind of crabby.
That's hilarious. I interviewed Sam a year ago, thereabouts, almost exactly. And it was literally like one of the most fun interviews. Like the edit was so it was like, and there I'm laughing again, and there's more laughing. Now she's laughing. Now I'm laughing. It's like, yeah. So speaking of the book, this book business and categorization, when I tell people I enjoy your books,
Thank you, first of all. Thanks for saying it.
always, I told somebody yesterday. I did a little name dropping of my own yesterday, and told somebody I was speaking with you today, and they were like, and it turned out they were like a huge fan. They had like a shelf full of books, which was right on hand to show me. But when I tell people, because I am a cis het dude,
Sure.
beard and male pattern baldness, the whole package, like I've got the full kit.
Don't be hard on yourself.
Somebody will say like, oh, you read romance novels or something like that, and and I kind of struggle with that, not because I have any problem with reading, like with being told I read romance novels.
Sure.
But
Mhm.
I wonder, do you think about genre?
Oh yeah, I don't think about genre at all.
Yeah.
Well, and I've had a friend who was a romance writer tell me I was writing terrible romances before. like that my guys were too wimpy and my girls were too unlikable and I don't think she
Yeah.
speaks for all romance writers and I don't but no, I don't think about genre. I think my books I don't know we I don't exactly know what makes something a romance is
Mm,
a book about people who fall in love and I don't know that it matters. Um, I think sometimes if people are, well, here's what I think. Here's the way that I think genre matters. And I think sometimes genre is a way of saying this is what I'm comfortable with and this is what is soothing to me. Um, and this
mm,
is like books can be comforting. And I think that knowing there's happily ever after, knowing that the guy is definitely going to be a good bad guy, that there's something very like if you are cuddling up with that book and you need to be soothed, I think you kind of want to know that it's going to fit your expectations. But I don't
mm.
know how my books fit or don't fit into that because I think some people would say, I love romance and I love your books and your books are romance. And then other people have said, I love romance and your books are not romance. And I found it upsetting. Um, so, so if, yeah. so I don't think about it. I'm just kind of doing my thing. Um, but
Hmm.
I think definitely my books are considered romance by some readers. It's kind
Mm.
of like YA, like I don't know, Eleanor Park YA. Do you want to read it and you like YA? Good. Yeah, plenty of room at the table for me.
Uh, uh, One time I asked Twitter about romance novels with sad endings.
Oh yeah.
I was thinking about The Fault in Our Stars. I was thinking about like we're propelled through that book by the love story, but I mean, spoiler alert if you haven't read John Green's like multi gazillion copies selling with the movie and everything, like
Yeah. 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 And what did and they said The Fault in Our Stars
and
is that.
I got excoriated
Oh,
for daring to suggest that that was a legitimate point of view that you could like want a romance novel and at the end they're not together or like something bad happens like it doesn't work out.
it's not a romance, is what people on Twitter were saying to you.
Precisely that which
Yeah.
is interesting because it means that romance is a genre which cannot be recognized through a partial reading,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah, but I think romance readers would say that books usually signal to you
Mm,
before,
yeah,
right?
and I think you put your finger on it. Comfort. And if you've come to it for the happy ending, and if that's what you were trying to get out of it, and then you didn't, then yeah, you would feel. I could see how you'd feel cheated. And how much comfort do we get? I mean, goodness.
Yeah, you're like, exactly. How much comfort do we get? And you can begrudge anyone anything that makes them feel good.
Yeah,
Well, I take that back, but largely.
there are boundaries, but yes, the sentiment is well read. Yeah.
It's right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I read a lot of fan fiction. And fan fiction comes heavily labeled when you read it. Like they
Hmm.
usually, it's got this trope, it has this sort of ending. It feels like this. Now, I typically skip those tags because I'm kind of just there for the ride.
Mm.
And if it's a writer I like, I don't really care where we're going. Um, but I know that for other readers, those tags are super important, and they're only going to read something if it checks their boxes.
Hmm. One of the things I really love about your books is how the characters talk to each other.
Oh,
And yes, there's a repartee, and the repartee is great. And I love when we get into like tennis match scenes, and
mm,
that's fun. But what I really like, what the meatiness of it for me is about how often dialogue will be like it'll pick up momentum through frustration,
mm,
through a digging for like what's the like trying to describe a feeling and trying to have it perceived accurately by the other person.
yeah.
What was so interesting to read that in this book was how much it was about finding the words. I wonder as you write dialogue, I guess the question really is does it tumble out of you when you're writing it like that?
No, I would say it more dialogue more tumbles out of me.
Mm,
But and in fact, it's like kind of how I get something started. I write dialogue. So if I can't figure out who the characters are, I write a lot of dialogue. The dialogue kind of happens. And dialogue happens for me like when I'm driving. I write a lot of dialogue. I just find myself imagining it. Um, all of my fantasies, good or bad, are dialogue. I'm either arguing with someone or fantasizing about the way it's going to go.
mm,
So that part, but then, it's not that I don't edit it or refine it. And sometimes the frustration the characters are feeling and expressing their feelings is the frustration I'm feeling, trying to express how they feel. Um, my first novel is mostly email conversations between two women.
mhm.
And that happened because I was just so much more comfortable writing dialogue than I was narrative. Like I wrote all the email first, and then I went back and wrote the narrative because I was so insecure and had just didn't know where to start.
As you were writing dialogue in slow dance,
Mhm.
was I wonder how the shape of those feelings was that something that emerged as you're writing the those discussions, or are you writing the discussions towards them getting it, if that makes sense?
I think it does. You tell me if I'm answering it the way you mean it.
Mm,
I know where they're going. I almost always know where they're going. That's the thing I know. I know, like, situationally, when I start a book, how the characters relate to each other and what needs to happen over the book. So I'm trying to get them there. And then I'm trying to think about how they could realistically get there. And sometimes the goal changes. Just recently, I'm writing, it's always weird by the time you're talking about a book, you're like up to your neck in another book. The
mm,
book I'm writing now, I had in my head that the guy was going to be a specific kind of jerk. And then as I was writing the dialogue, I thought, I've built him to not quite be as jerky as I planned for him to be. So I'm having to revise my goal for him. He's becoming a better person because I built him too nice. I just built him too soundly at the beginning. He can't be that bad by the end. So the goal might shift, but normally it's like, no, I know where they're going. I knew exactly what was going to happen with Shiloh and Carrie, and I just had to figure out like what could realistically happen. What could they say to each other to get them there?
You mentioned there are a couple of poor kids,
Yeah.
and the narrative doesn't come out and say doesn't come out and really describe it in those terms. What it does is we get scenes, we get information, we just learn about what their situations are, and we can intuit from that it's a lack of means that has them in this situation. Carrie's situation is especially complicated. There are unspoken things in the family about actual bloodlines and
Correct.
yeah,
His grandma's raising him as her own son. Like Shiloh kind of blurts that out for us really early. It's like family secret, but it's not a secret to
it's
us
not,
as the reader.
yeah, and sort of like the culture of the family is to talk around it.
Mhm.
It occurred to me like, maybe halfway through, maybe most of the way through, that Carrie's family situation, I was getting lost. I was having to like skip back and like, hang on a second, did I whatever.
Look at that side, but okay. Okay.
It's probably on me because that happens to me a lot. So this is not
Okay.
like
I'm sure. We've
d-
identified the one flaw in the book. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, dear listeners, please understand. I like once I decide like these characters are interesting to me in a book, I have a tough time following others. So if I choose wrongly and they come to bear weight later, I get into trouble.
Oh, as soon as someone starts describing a machine, I'm like, skim, skim, skim. Then later I'm like, oh, now I need to know how that machine worked.
Right, exactly. Like yeah. Suddenly the plot hinges on whether you understood the whether the belt was going clockwise or counter. Yeah,
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so yes, Carrie's confusing family situation.
well, I guess it's realistic because it's people have messy families. Like
Yeah.
that's a thing. Um, I guess I wonder, as a writer, as you undertake a project like this, that you're giving the reader enough information, even a reader like me who has trouble processing some of it.
Yeah.
We've got enough information to understand the situation, but it doesn't bog down. Like maybe it's a deliberate creation of a little bit of confusion and noise that we're supposed to feel like, I don't know what the situation is over at that house. Like it's,
I think that people who have less functional lives have more complicated lives, often
mm,
in more complicated situations. I think back to Eleanor and Park, and how many siblings she had and the situation with her stepfather and whose dad was whose. Often when you're describing an unconventional family, it gets complicated fast. So it's interesting that you bring that up because Carrie's parentage, in a conversation with one of the people who gave me the most feedback on this book, their opinion was that the fact that Carrie's been raised by his grandma to believe his grandma and his mom, but his sister is actually his mom, um, that I should make that more of a reveal, more of a plot twist that maybe Carrie finds out. Like their
mm,
suggestion was, it's such a big detail, and you're just throwing it away in one of the early chapters. Shiloh tells the reader, oh yeah, Carrie's mom is his grandma, his real mom's his sister. It's a whole mess, right?
yeah,
They were like, that hits so hard. This person said it should be part of the plot, and maybe Carrie doesn't know, and he finds out in the second act, and Shiloh has to help him process it. And um, I grew up in with no money ever in a messed up family situation with lovely people in it, but in a messed up situation, surrounded by other kids who had messed up situations. You know, um, there's a game that Shiloh plays in the book that my friends and I used to jokingly play where you just point at some guy and say, that's your dad. Like, it's like a joke you can only play with other people
yeah,
who don't have dads around.
yeah,
And it's like not funny, but it becomes very funny. So if that's your daily life, the fact that somebody's being raised by their grandma is just kind of nothing.
yeah,
Like I had to say to my reader who grew up in a very 50s sitcom scenario, like if Shiloh and Carrie made that big, the deal that you want me to make of this, the emphasis you want me to put on it, the weight and import is not the import that these two characters would put on it because they are swimming in it all the time. And the fact that Carrie's got a grandma who really loves him, a mom who loves him, Like he's not in the worst situation.
Hmm.
Um, and there, but also when you're surrounded by people who are just trying to make things work, you kind of take people as they are, and you don't want to like take them apart for especially the imperfections they can't help. These are just kids, right?
Hmm.
You you meet a kid, their family's fucked up, your family's fucked up. The thing that's important is that neither of you are holding that against each other. You're just accepting. So when Carrie tells Shiloh about his family and it's something he's kind of ashamed of,
Yeah.
she's like, whatever, my family's fucked up too. So maybe you're right in that I did kind of treat it like noise because to me it is, in a way, it is noise. Like I want the reader to understand, but I don't want to write about people who have simple lives just because it's simpler to talk about them. Like, yeah, I want to write about messy people who have messy, complicated things that are hard to explain. And maybe that means that the books feel a little messy sometimes. I'll have to think about that.
No, I think that that really gets it in the response to that information, exactly as you said. That's it's just a thing. It's just okay. That's the situation. And it wasn't a reveal. And actually, I appreciated that it wasn't a reveal because I don't think it would have borne that much weight. It wouldn't have been genuine
Right.
because it would have overshadowed how open and loving Lois is. And that the lovely thing about her is she's like immediately prepared upon meeting Shiloh's kids to be like, I got two more grandchildren. There we go. Done. There you go.
Right. Yeah, she's lovely. Um, yeah, I think that, I wanted to write about Carrie's shame too. So
Yeah.
his situation weighs on him. And one of the reasons he maybe hasn't made close friends since Shiloh is for him, his history is kind of a burden. And
Mhm.
she's like, I'm sure there are people you could trust with your past. And he's like, it's not even, it's like having to tell people. Um, until I wrote Eleanor and Park, I had never really talked about the way I grew up with my friends who I met in college or at work.
Mm.
Um, and I remember a friend saying, being really hurt by this, like, well, I had no idea that you had grown up in a hard way.
Mm.
And I read this book and I felt really betrayed that you had never told me that. And I thought, well, when would I have told you that? Like, when would I have been like, now I've got something really dramatic to say to you? Like you want people to meet you where you are. You don't want to have to like hold your painful parts ahead of you and go sort through this shit first.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm letting Carrie not forward that all the time, even in the book. It's like just something we get to talk about in almost a flippant way.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to shift gears.
Okay, good.
I'm going to ask you about comics.
Oh, yeah, it's not comics.
Runaways is concluded. We can use whatever euphemism we want for it. The Marvel folks
I say canceled, yes.
canceled. Yeah, Marvel has Marvel has made its decision, and that's how it is.
Marvel is Marvel.
But She-Hulk, as I understand, is still running.
For the moment, it's still ticking.
Exactly, it's day to day.
Yes.
Yeah, it's day to day.
Yeah, I think like as we're talking, issue 8 is on the stand. Yeah, yes, issue 8, but it's basically like issue 23 because we've also read. This is complicated. Anyway, go on.
Oh yeah, no, you forget about the numbers. I'm not a proper comics person. I need them like when's the hardcover coming? I'm ready for that. Like that's a book. I know how to buy a thing with an ISBN. I can do that.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um,
Several trade paperbacks available.
yes, exactly. So because I mean, as you said, you love writing dialogue and you are so wonderful at it. Had you considered writing like you hopefully you've noticed you have a real career like as a writer of comic books.
Yeah.
Did you see that coming for yourself like when you were a kid?
No, I did not. Mm-mm.
Not even when you were like crushing so hard on the X-Men.
Yeah, I was crushing on the X-Men. I was reading tons of comics. I mean, when I was writing attachments, I was exclusively reading comics. I was reading so many X-Men comics, I didn't have room in my life for books. Um, but first of all, I really felt like that ship had sailed. Like if you were going to get into comics, you would have done it before 40, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've always understood comics to be male dominated and,
Mm.
both on both sides, creative and readers. So it seemed especially not likely. But I got that job. I got my job at Marvel because an editor read Eleanor and Park, and comics are a really big part of the plot in Eleanor and Park. And he sent me a note saying, "It's obvious you love comics. Would you like to write something for us?" And I actually asked in that initial conversation if I could bring back Runaways.
Oh,
Yeah, Is that like where you just ask for the thing you want, but you don't think you're gonna get? But I was just having like a really like what the hell moment, and he was like, "Yeah."
You thought you were just making conversation. You were just expressing your like love of like a lesser known series or
I thought I was gonna get shut down. I thought, what? He offered me something I didn't want. He offered me a character I didn't really know or hadn't heard of,
hmm,
and I was like, I don't know. What I'd really like, what I would say yes to right away
yeah.
is Runaways. That's my favorite book, and it's been canceled or it's been shelved for years. That's my favorite team. I'd love to bring it back. And he was like, "Yeah, let's talk."
Wow.
I was like, "We're right."
Was She-Hulk also hey, can I write She-Hulk?
Yeah, yeah. So again, I was always like, "Hey, what's going on with She-Hulk?" And she'd been in the Avengers, um, and then they kind of wanted to set her back to her factory settings for the TV show.
Hmm.
You know, get her to be in kind of like the She-Hulk that people think of when they think of She-Hulk. And I've been asking for I've always loved She-Hulk. Like, again, in Elmer Park, Park has a big crush on She-Hulk because I have a big crush on She-Hulk. So yeah, I couldn't wait to get my hands on that character.
I need to ask about hummingbird cake. I can't close. I have to ask. Tell me about hummingbird cake. It's real, first of all?
Yeah. It's like it tastes like carrot cake, but there are no carrots in it. It's got like bananas and pecans and other other allergens. It's like a southern cake, and I've had it a couple times with a cream cheese frosting.
Hmm.
I always like to imagine, like I like to really say specifically what they're eating. So, yeah, there's a couple scenes with hummingbird cake, which became really stuck out in readers' minds. Like even my agent was like, wait, is that a real thing?" And like, what is that?
I will figure out if I can get myself a slice of hummingbird cake. My wife is allergic to nuts, so that does create some barriers to home preparation. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. It's actually having a moment. Hummingbird cake is having a moment. I think I saw a recipe in the New York Times recently, and then I was at Disney World and they were serving it. And I was like, great, perfect timing,
there you
zeitgeist.
go. A lot of successful writers spend a lot of their careers trying to write their way out of the shadow of their, great early work. And so I wanted to ask you, do you think you'll ever get out from under the shadow of what you have called, and I'm quoting here, your best and most famous story? I'm referring, of course, to the one about the biggest popcorn ball in the world.
Oh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that was for my days as the Western Iowa reporter. If you
Yeah.
invite me to your library, I will tell the story about the biggest popcorn ball in the world and the privilege that I had to report on it to break the news to the world about the biggest popcorn ball in Sac County, Iowa.
Oh, life is a rich pageant.
Yeah, it is.
Rainbow, thank you for joining us.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really a delight. I mean, I know that we don't have an excuse to do this anytime soon, but I would love to. It was great to talk to you again.
Same. I have been speaking with Rainbow Rowell, author of the wonderful new novel, Slow Dance. Find it and all the books we spoke about at Kobo in Conversations home on the web, kobo.com/conversation. There is a link in the show notes. Subscribe in your podcast player to catch every episode. And if you enjoyed this one, you should tell somebody about it. And do it sometime in the next 14 years. Don't wait. Don't let things pass you by. Kobo in Conversation is produced, edited, and hosted by me, Nathan Maharaj. Thank you for listening.
Ta-da!
Ta-da!
That was really fun. Thank you.
Oh, it was such a I was so glad we were able to do this, and I was so glad I was able to. That I'm so glad you wrote this book. I'm so glad it's here. Yeah.
Great questions. Thank you. Also, it was fun the first time too. I was giving you a hard time, but I had a great time. I have good memories of that day.
I'm just hard on myself because of course, like I watched the game tape and I've now because I edit this show, I have to listen to myself go, oh, there he goes. He's 30 seconds, 40 seconds, 50 seconds. He'll get to the question soon. Oh, here it comes.
I remember you asking me how I got anything written because I was on Twitter so much. Do you remember this question?
I no, I couldn't have asked it that. Oh God, I know. Oh, it's coming
I'm
back.
sure I'm posting
Oh,
it.
it's coming
I was
back.
like,
Oh
it's
no.
whenever, whenever I'm on Twitter and I'm on Twitter too much, I have this moment of like, Rainbow, you gotta check yourself.
Oh no.
Log off.
Oh no. Oh my God. Yes. I remember that where yes. I thought I was being cute and
So it was,
and you played it for like yeah yeah that was oh my God, I'm sweating now. Jesus.
oh, no,
The body
but it
remembers.
was fun. It was fun. I even remembered what I was wearing that day. It was a good time. I had a good time in Toronto.